Hello, and welcome to the next part of our Chapter a Day series going through the book of Genesis. Today we're in Genesis chapter 10. We've been looking at, over the last couple chapters, the story of the flood and Noah and his relationship with God. Now we find in chapter 10, moving from Noah, who has been recorded as having died in the end of chapter 9, we're now going to follow the generations of his children. And the purpose of this chapter is to help us understand the repopulation of the earth and the development of the nations. So we're going to take a look here and simply go through this chapter. It's a short chapter looking at the spread of people groups moving out from the initial families of Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Starting at verse 1 of chapter 10. These are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Sons were born to them after the flood. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshesh, and Tiras. The sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphtha, and Thogamah. The sons of Javan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. From these, the coastland peoples spread in their lands, each with his own language, by their clans in their nations. The sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, Saphta, Rama, and Sabteca. The sons of Rama, Sheba, and Denon. Cush fathered Nimrod, and he was the first on the earth to be a mighty man. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Eresh, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. From that land he went into Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth that year, and Calah, and Rezin between Nineveh and Calah, that is a great city. Egypt fathered Ludum, Enamin, Ledabin, and Naphthalin, Pathrusim, and Kalashum, from whom the Philistines came, and Caphtorim. Canaan fathered Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusites, the Amorites, and the Girgashites, the Hivites, the Archites, and the Sinites, the Arvadites, the Zemarites, and the Hamathites. Afterwards, the clans of Canaanites dispersed, and the territory of the Canaanites extended from Sidon in the direction of Gerar as far as Gaza, in the direction of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zoidim, as far as Lasha. And these are the sons of Ham by their clans, and their languages, and their lands, and their nations. To Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber, the elder brother of Jephthah, children were born. The sons of Shem, Elam, Asher, Arpachshad, Lud, and Aram. The sons of Aram, Uz, Hul, Gether, and Mash. Arpachshad fathered Shelah, and Shelah fathered Eber. And Eber was born two sons. The name of one was Peleg. For his days the earth was divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Joktan fathered Almadad, Shelpha, Ahazmerhath, and Jerah. Hadoram, Uzal, and Dikhal. Obal, Amaral, and Sheba. Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. All of these were the sons of Joktan. The territory in which they lived extended from Masha in the direction of Shephar to the hill country in the east. These are the sons of Shem by their clans, their language, their lands, and their nations. These are the clans of the sons of Noah, according to their genealogies, in their nations, and from these the nations spread abroad on the earth after the flood. So we come to this description here, where we have Noah, We have Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And from them, we see this spreading out of people groups. And the sense that we're given in the text, of course, this picture here is intended to extend beyond some of the events that we'll read in the upcoming chapters of how the people groups, families, clans, tribes began to move out to find space and to spread around the earth. Among the many names that are given, there are certain names that are intended to stand out. And those are names that we find under the descendants of Shem and the descendants of Ham. They're significant because of the interactions that will take place between these specific people groups. As we know that Canaan falls in this group, and we learn that the children of Israel I left out the S. Sorry about that. Those things where you look at and you know something is not right there. And the children of Israel, we see that what takes place between them. And we also read of others. We see Assyria appearing here and some of the other nations that will interact with Israel. And of course the connection here, which then goes back, of course, to the curse that we read about in the last chapter. Because there is a level of animosity which exists between the descendants of Ham and the descendants of Shem. We'll see that tension that exists there, not just among the people of Canaan, but also the other groups, the ancient Babylonians, the Assyrians, these ones that we see that will interact with them as well. And then, of course, there are the people groups that we see from Japheth that will have an effect here as well. Japheth, pardon me. So the picture here in this short chapter is just to give an idea, how did humankind fulfill the mandate given to Noah that continued the initial creation mandate to multiply. So for those going back, reading, well, if all the peoples of the world were destroyed in the flood, how then can the population of the earth be maintained? And so we're given this picture. Well, we have Ham and his wife, Shem and his wife, Japheth and his wife, and they are having children. Again, we have to understand, whenever we look back in the creation narrative, whenever we go back, we have to understand that the concern over limited population and interbreeding does not yet exist. Why? Because we run with the assumption that humanity was created physically perfect, without flaw. Over the generations, over each subsequent generation, the impact of our sin corrupting everything also has corrupted our DNA. So we reach the point as we move forward from creation, forward from the flood, that the gene pool begins to become an issue. Because there are so many corruptions in our gene pool that if people are to intermarry too closely, they will begin to compound some of those errors which would lead to problems. So we'll see later in Scripture where God puts down clear limits as to how closely related two people can be and enter into a marriage relationship. But at this point, it's assumed the gene pool has not been as corrupted as it will become, and therefore it is possible for these people groups to then expand and begin to repopulate the earth. And that's the sense we have, that looking back, we see them and the names being listed in the text. Many of them would resonate with the ancient peoples who would later read this text after it is written by Moses and go, okay, we know these people groups, we know those people groups, we know where they are ending up and where they've headed to. It makes sense. And the important thing I do want to draw your attention to, which is a foreshadowing of an event that will come up next, is the statement that we see here, each with his own language, by their clans and their nations. We see that repeated several times. As each one is described, we're told, each with their clans, their languages, and their nations. Why is that significant? Because at the moment, at this point, there is one common language. People were created together, they've lived together. There is one language that would naturally unite them. So when we read that these groups and who they eventually become, each with their own lands, each with their own language, the question then arises, what happened to language? And this is what we'll pick up in the next chapter, because that question is answered. After giving this description, talking about how all the people groups have their ties back here, what caused them to disperse and what caused them to become so separated from each other, that will be answered in chapter 11. As I said at the beginning, this is a small chapter, and it gives us a small picture of what is happening. There are certain names that pop out that are worth noting, one of which, the only character name that we see, the only actual person who's named in this genealogy besides simply listing of names that we have a description of, is we hear that Cush fathered Nimrod, and he was the first on the earth to be a mighty man. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The idea that he was powerful and probably would be the first person of renown in going out and accomplishing things and building an empire to himself. And we read, the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Eresh, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. And then from that land he went into Assyria and built Nineveh, and Rehoboth, Ir, and Calah, and Rezin between Nineveh and Calah, that is a great city. So we have this picture of this character Nimrod, who is an empire builder. And Nimrod will become a figure among ancient peoples as one who goes and builds empires for himself. And he is a character that will appear later in the story in reference to this physical person who sought to go out not simply just to multiply and populate, but to actually build and conquer. So we'll keep an eye out for those references as we move forward in the story. I hope that even in the short chapter, there's been some things for you to think about and to chew on as we look at how God's initial promise and God's requirement to Noah in repopulating the earth is mapped out as we see Ham, Shem, and Japheth and their descendants. So we also begin to get a glimpse of the conflict which exists between Canaan and Israel and how that is going to play out in the generations moving forward, and also in the plans and providence of God. I hope this is an encouragement to you today. As always, we'd love to hear your feedback, and please, if this blesses or encourages you, share it with somebody else. Thank you, and God bless.